Hi, my name's Adele Thackeray and I'm one of the Cadw archaeologists for North West Wales. Now I visit many archaeological sites in the line of my work. However, the Roman fort of Segontium in Caernarfon is one that's particularly close to my heart. The Segontium Roman fort was first built around 77 AD when the Romans came in and took conquest over northwest Wales. Now they stamped their authority on Caernarfon as well as Wales, and they subdued the tribes, especially from Mona, which is the Isle of Anglesey.
Segontium is the westernmost fort of the Roman Empire, established after the period of campaigning in North Wales by Agricola. It's a well-chosen site above the River Seont, close to the Menai Strait, and easy access to Anglesey, which is a fertile island and an island with metal resources, so that this fort must have been designed to be not only a military garrison to hold the area, but also a potential economic centre for the empire when things have calmed down after the initial invasion phase.
So the soldiers form many formations. This one will defend them from the chariots of the Britons and the horses as they scream in, throwing their darts and rocks. They turn, the horses will not crash through that. They're not as stupid as the man on top of them.
I'm currently stood in one of the barrack blocks on Segontium Roman fort. Now, one barrack block would have held 80 infantry troops, and if you look around, they're not that big, so it's quite a confined space. There would have been pairs of rooms with 8 troops to a room. Now, one of these blocks would have possibly housed cavalry. There would have been 2 troops of cavalry and 64 men to a block. Today, Cadw, in collaboration with others, the National Trust and the local councils, have started to run a series of events at the fort to really highlight this place and its importance in the history and heritage of North West Wales.
Gladiators were one of the greatest spectacles that was part of Roman civilization. Originally begun as part of funeral rites for extremely rich people, it developed into a way of controlling public opinion. As a spectator sport, it's most probably one of the most addictive things to actually see. The number of people all crowded and crushed together within one space, and our natural predisposition for the fascination with death, pain and things like that, even today we're still tied in with that same idea of mentally being unable to turn away from the sites that most probably would have been part of the games 2,000 years ago.
To the west of us here you have an Iron Age hill fort called Caernarfon, but one of the interesting things about Caernarfon, it's occupied during the Roman period. Now the fort at Segontium dates to 78 AD, and what we're finding at Caernarfon is Roman pottery, evidence of Roman occupation, and it asks really an interesting question then. How come you've got the Celts in a huge fort 15 miles or so to the west, and the Romans here at Segontium in Caernarfon? But it would seem that the native Celts on the Llŷn Peninsula and the Romans here must have come to some form of understanding that there's some kind of treaty. And there may be a question, you know, recent excavations at Tai Cochion near Bryn Shenkin and Anglesey, we found what was initially thought to be a Roman settlement, but it's more than likely a Romano-British or British settlement, again full of Roman pottery. So what you're seeing, and this is towards the end, towards 90 AD onwards, into the 2nd century, end of the 1st century, into the 2nd century, we're probably seeing the Celts and the Romans living together, trading together, coming to an understanding.
Segontium is one of the longest lasting, the garrison remains at Segontium, one of the longest periods as you know things contract in Britain, suggests that this is still an important base for Rome, and it may be because of metal industries, particularly copper, and perhaps a re-establishment of the earlier Iron Age iron industry out of the bogs of Merioneth and things, so that it's likely that in the end of its period of Roman occupation, Segontium may have been largely an economic administrative centre rather than a military one.
I'm currently walking down into the strong room of the fort. As you can see, it's below level. It would have been quite low inside, so if you crouch down you get an idea of how much space would have been inside here. Above here we believe that there was possibly an officer's quarters where documents would have been kept, but in the 1920s when this was excavated, coins were found down here. So this is almost like the treasury of the fort. Now I'm currently stood inside one of the rooms, but as we move outside of this room we come into quite a large open space which would have been a courtyard or a garden. So the commander of the fort had quite a lot of special space that he used himself. Now this would have possibly been filled with planters and statues to the gods and lots of beautiful flowers. So it's very hard to envisage when you look at the fort in plan how this would have been nearly 2,000 years ago.
So the history is quite complicated. It is, of course, a wooden fort when it's first set up. The rampart is wooden, the buildings are wooden inside. When it's worked, as it were, when it's well established, it is then turned into a more permanent stone-built structure. The rampart is stone, and you can still see that stone rampart, and the internal buildings, especially the commander's house and the main headquarters and things, become stone buildings. And there's even quite a nice little accountant's office.
This room is fascinating because it has underfloor heating. Now the reason for this is that it might have been used for a writing room, somewhere where an accountant could sit and keep records and keep warm. Now this would have been a colonnaded court, and as you can see here there's a central well. This is where all the water supply for the troops would have come from. It's also the place where orders would have been issued to the men.
So in 60 and 61 AD, we have accounts by Tacitus of the Romans under the leadership of Suetonius Paulinus attacking Anglesey. This is to deal with the Druids. What happens at the same time, Boudica, Buddig we call it in Welsh, kicks off in Essex. She leads a rebellion in Essex, and the Romans have to go back to southeast England to deal with Boudica. So we have an interesting period between 61 and 78, which is about 17 years, where the Celts are left here to their own devices, and the Romans then return 77, 78 to finish the job, literally. This is what Segontium's all about. This is planting a fort, northwest Wales, to finish the job.